The biblical text of Revelation 14 operates as a highly rigid three-part system outlining the absolute conclusion of human history. This framework is modeled as a structured sequence. It utilizes mathematical timelines, specific doctrinal parameters, and the mechanics of socioeconomic coercion. The system consists of three nodes: a chronological trigger, an ideological schism, and a final phase of legislative enforcement. By constructing this model, we can trace how an ancient decree issued in 457 BC leads directly to a global mandate over modern worship and digital commerce. The first angel's message relies on an interpretive ratio found in Ezekiel 4:6 and Numbers 14:34, the principle that one prophetic day represents one historical year. Applying this ratio allows us to map the timeline of the judgment phase. The starting point is the prophecy of the 2300 days given to Daniel. This is anchored to the command to restore and build Jerusalem, a decree issued by King Artaxerxes in 457 BC. This timeline plots the full 2300-year span, marking the distance between the ancient decree and the cleansing of the sanctuary. Nested within this period is a specific allotment of 70 weeks, or 490 years, granted to the Jewish nation, starting from that 457 BC anchor. The prophecy specifies that 69 weeks, or 483 years, would pass until the appearance of the Messiah. Calculating 483 years from 457 BC brings the timeline to 27 AD. This date aligns with the historical record found in the text of Luke 3:1. It identifies the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar as the time of Christ's baptism and the start of his ministry. The prophecy states that in the middle of the final week, the Messiah would end the sacrificial system. Adding 3.5 years to the 27 AD start date reaches the year 31 AD. In 31 AD, Christ was crucified, an event marked by the tearing of the temple veil. This signified that the sacrificial system had been superseded by its ultimate fulfillment. Adding the final 3.5 years completes the 490-year period in 34 AD, the year the gospel message began its transition to the Gentile world. With the first 490 years of the prophecy fulfilled, 1,810 years remain of the original 2,300-year span. Starting from 34 AD and adding those remaining 1,810 years brings the chronology to 1844. This identifies 1844 as the threshold for the hour of judgment, serving as the trigger for the remaining eschatological warnings. The second angel warns of the fall of Babylon. Historically, Babel represents the origin of confusion and the rejection of divine instruction for human effort. In this framework, Babylon is a global spiritual confederacy, a system uniting paganism, Catholicism, and apostate Protestantism. The wine of her fornication is a system of false teachings, identifiable by contrasting institutional traditions against biblical axioms. The first departure involves death. Babylon adopts inherent immortality, while the biblical model describes death as a sleep, with immortality granted only at the resurrection. The second departure involves a shift in the perceived source of authority over divine law. This shift is most visible in the day of worship. While the biblical text specifies the seventh-day Sabbath, the Babylonian system substitutes it with Sunday, a practice adopted from sun worship. This transition was not based on a scriptural mandate, but on the exercise of institutional power by the Church. Church records highlight this shift as an indicator of authority. A 1923 entry in the Catholic records states that the change from Sabbath to Sunday serves as proof the Church holds authority over the Bible. Babylon's threat is the ideological replacement of divine commands with human tradition, demanding global submission to its authority. The third angel warns against the mark of the beast, detailing the consequences for those who comply with Babylon's system. The text defines this mark as legislated compliance with Babylonian doctrine, specifically the institutional enforcement of Sunday observance. The mark is received on the forehead or the right hand. The forehead represents ideological assent, a genuine belief in the false system. The right hand signifies pragmatic cooperation, conforming to the mandate merely for the sake of survival. In contrast, the seal of God is only placed on the forehead. While the beast accepts forced compliance, the biblical model requires genuine intellectual conviction. Forced compliance is achieved through total economic exclusion. The text specifies that those without the mark are restricted from the ability to buy or sell. The transition away from physical cash toward digital transactions creates the infrastructure for this restriction. In a cashless system, economic access can be denied instantly. This represents a fusion of religious and civil power, using modern financial infrastructure to regulate spiritual compliance. When assembled, these three pillars, chronology, ideology, and enforcement, show how the components of Revelation 14 interlock. This chronology identifies 1844 as the start of the judgment phase, signaling that the period for choosing between tradition and divine instruction is currently active. The crisis centers on a choice of authority, whether to submit to institutional tradition for the sake of economic survival or to adhere to the commandments of God. The natural conclusion of this framework is the return of Christ and the final harvest of the earth. This harvest separates those who yield to institutional authority from those who maintain the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Revelation 14 serves as a precise warning system, marking the intersection where prophecy, ideology, and economic survival meet.